Call to order the Etna Township Board of Trustees special meeting Wednesday, June 26, 2024 at 6 p.m. Roll call, please.
Mr. Evans?
Here.
Mr. Burkholder?
Here.
Ms. McKee?
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So move.
I'll second it. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Burkholder?
Yes.
Do we want the lights on back there? Is it too dark for you? These are. Or are you good?
I'm good. Do you
Okay,
need?
no, that's fine.
I'm thinking sometimes, I don't know if we want to turn off those side lights if we could see the presentation better, but we'll see how that goes. Agenda was adopted. We now will have a presentation by Jim Linner with Neighborhood Strategies. We've been working with Jim for a couple years now, and so we wanted to have this presentation. I want to thank everyone for coming. After the presentation, we'll go ahead and open it up so you can have comments and questions as well. So, Mr. Linner, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Appreciate the opportunity. Make sure, we're on. So going to go high level on some of the information that's contained in the comp plan, go over the process. I know there's a few committee members here, so feel free to jump in if I say something wrong on behalf of the committee. But commissioners or trustees also, if there's questions going through, just stop me and I can better elaborate on things. So the plan itself is broke up into sections. I guess should I introduce myself? I guess I assume people. Sorry. So my name is Jim Linner, Neighborhood Strategies. Worked on the comp plan for 2 years. Prior to starting the company, I was city manager in Johnstown, city planner as well. Before that, worked at the County Planning Commission. Actually worked on the 2011 comp plan for Etna Township. Since we last met, I've gained my certification as a American Institute of Certified Planners. So all that means is I get to put letters after my name. So that's myself and my company. We have 5 people doing a lot of work in and around Intel and Southeast Ohio, updating comprehensive plans and zoning resolutions on behalf of townships and municipalities. So now going back into the plan elements, those were the plan elements that were drafted as part of this plan. I'm not going to read them off, but it's basic transportation, land use, whatnot. I also like to take the opportunity to explain to whoever is listening what this document is versus what it's not compared to a zoning resolution. So this document is a policy, it is not law. So as your zoning commission or your board of trustees are making decisions, it's recommended you go with the comprehensive plan, but it's not legally mandated that you go with the comprehensive plan. So whereas your zoning is a law, you have to follow the process, you have to follow what is stated in the zoning resolution. Also, this future land use map in here is usually the most, that's the lightning rod for all comp plans. However, there is a lot of information that I think the township could utilize in addition to that future land use map that is beneficial to the residents as development occurs. And so just looking specifically at future land use map, I think isn't a good use of the document. I think there's a lot of other things in there. However, I understand future land use map, comp plan are also realized sometimes as one thing to most people. The future land use map that the township uses to guide their decisions, again, is a guide, it is not the law. So you don't have to go with the future land use map. You should go with the future land use map, but if there's reasons not to, it's not the end of the world if you don't do it. However, our recommendation is you do. You can also change any of this document with a resolution by the trustees. Whereas a zoning resolution, it's the zoning map that you have to abide by whatever zoning districts there is. You have a process to amend that zoning resolution, so it's much more rigid and spelled out in the zoning resolution of how you go ahead and change that. The next phase, kind of going over what we did. We had a planning committee meeting, a lot of them, I forget exactly, maybe 12, 15. And we had 15 people on the committee. We sent out a survey. We drafted the plan. We had continual feedback from the committee as to if my team, myself and Stephanie, were doing what we thought we should be doing based on the prior month's feedback. It has gone to your zoning commission, and obviously we're here tonight for the presentation. Jumping into the planning committee, I just put everybody's name up there, which is very hard to read. The organizations that were represented were ex officio, so they didn't really have a vote. I should say they didn't have a vote, but they did give good information from the standpoint of the school districts, the fire district, and the water and sewer district. The planning process, so we started in June of 22. Here we are today. We had 14 committee meetings and about 280 hours of community volunteerism on behalf of the township working on this. We had 693 survey responses. We posted things on the website and streamed a few of the meetings once those wrinkles got ironed out. This community input, we sent out this mailer to all property owners in the township, not just registered voters. We did property owners. We had 11.5% response rate, which you shoot for 10, so 11.5 is pretty good. We also, during the committee meetings, stressed that the survey is one data point. I can almost guarantee what every community survey is going to say. We don't want to change. We want to maintain rural character. I get that. So we always stress that the survey is just one piece of information that the committee and I used to formulate this plan. So 11.5%, I think the township should be proud with that survey response rate. So this is getting more into the meat and potatoes of the plan itself. The first map up here is the active transportation plan. So these are areas or corridors that the committee and us felt that were needed to have some sort of sidewalk, bike path, shared use path, something that is not motorized transportation. So this is connecting neighborhoods, connecting schools, connecting parks. So that those lines you see, those dashed lines on the map, do that. This is not saying that you need to go spend $100 million tomorrow and accomplish these things. This is saying as you rebuild your roads, as you seek grant funding or financing from the TID or some other organization, consider heavily the idea of incorporating active transportation into your plans. Nothing should be a surprise. 40 up and down Columbia and 310. And I think we have over there, was that Watkins? Yeah, Watkins with the school. So, and Mink. So again, just a recommendation as you guys are improving your roadways, the active transportation. As demographics change, some people want one car, some people can't afford a car. How do we get people to and from the places they want to go without the necessity of jumping in that car? So this is another way. Promotes healthy lifestyles, promotes social cohesion. If you see someone on the bike path or the sidewalk, you sit and talk to them and you get to know your neighbors as well. So it provides a little bit of community interaction as well. So that's active transportation. We then went to surface transportation. This is the nuts and bolts of what you guys do as trustees, fixing roads, fixing intersections. We put these roadways in there based on crash data, development pressure, things already in the works, such as Refugee Road. And The blue lines are roadways, either new or widened roads. And then the little circles are intersections that need some sort of improvement. We didn't, it's not in my wheelhouse or our committee's wheelhouse to tell you it needs to be a roundabout, it needs to be a four-way stop, it needs to be a signal. We purely said, hey, again, if you're looking at these things, if you're looking at funding, these intersections, the committee felt, we felt, were important to be looking at. And you also look down, we kind of went outside the box just because it's a known project, but down there in Etna Township on Taylor Road South, we put that in there because we knew it was coming and as a information point for the township and developers as they're looking at this document. And each segment in the plan has a little blurb about why it's important or why it needs to be looked at. Okay, so let's get into existing land use. At the time that the analysis was run, this was the makeup of the township. About 42% existing land use was agricultural. Those numbers, sitting down with Dave, do not equal 100% because there's minutia, there's right-of-way, data sources sometimes don't come out to 100%. So when you're crunching numbers, some of the data sets will not have 100%. But what this shows at the time, this is based on county auditor data. At the time we pulled it, it's the best available data that is out there that shows us what property is being used, what the percentage is. So 42% by county auditor standards is what the township is made up. For agriculture, it's 33, 11, 8, and 7. That just provides a snapshot of where you are at that time. You can see the map glows in green. That is agriculture, yellow is residential, blue is institutional, your schools, churches, potentially. Gray is your manufacturing and warehousing, and red is your retail. Also know that it's parcel based. So if like this little, or this big truck, this big square right here, rectangle, it may have a land use that is commercial, but the rest of it might be farmed. County auditor makes it commercial. So although that whole property might not actually be used for commercial uses, just something to keep in mind. So that's the existing land use. So we want to know where we're at. Excuse me. This is something that we talked about a lot. It's something that, from my company's standpoint, we're trying to get communities to think about. So we put it in here, and this is basically transect zones. This is a precursor to form-based code. And so what we put this in there, the reason we put this in there is to get the township and developers to think about not just what is built in terms of land use. So coffee shop, house, manufacturing, bank, whatever that is. Think about the building itself, how it's positioned to the road, how it interacts with pedestrian connections. What is make sure the roadway network is connected. So the principle of this is if we can mold the development in a way that has those elements, and if that land use changes, that building can be repurposed much easier than if you build, everyone knows what a Pizza Hut looks like. If you build a Pizza Hut, it's sometimes hard to reimagine that into something else. So if you look at a bank building, or if you look at something that can be repurposed much more easily, we hope that we can do it by using this transect zone. So this just lays the groundwork if the township wants to go forward with form-based code. Obviously your decision, but we at least put it in there to bring the conversation to light. I think the committee was agreeable that at least should be looked at, so we put this part in there. If you Google form-based code or transect zones, you can learn much more about it. I'm not giving it very much credibility at this point. The real reason this was developed was actually for infill development in big cities. We're trying to repurpose the concept. Instead of building something and then 20 years at the township have to, or maybe 50 years have to go and fix something, how about we just do it right the first time? Because this is very popular in infill developments, downtown areas, major traffic corridors. such as Wincus, they're doing this. This has also shown its face in the Lincoln County launched LCA plan, so the county is looking at it as well. So if you read about it, if you learn about it, you'll see that we're not St. Petersburg, Florida, we're not Savannah, Georgia, correct? But if we can use the concept of creating spaces that can be repurposed more easily than conventional ways, maybe that will stand the test of time going forward. So that is a big piece of this plan as well. This is the zones, just similar to a future land use map. We were looking at keeping the village center, or the township center, excuse me, more of that high intensity uses. And then the darker greens are your ag, again, not very intense. So based on the colors, that's how rigorous the development could be. And so that is the kind of a nuanced approach. What this is the future land use map. Again, this is what everyone loves to see. Here's a breakdown of all the different types of land use we put in there. So residential is more than ag. What I'll show on the map, though, I think is planned residential is not just homes and roads. It's similar to a PUD. How can developers work with the township to create subdivisions and neighborhoods and developments that are appealable to the developer, the residents, your visitors, and everybody? So their existing land use is like 40-some% of ag, it's down to 20. That's true, but we also create residential, or excuse me, park and open space cutouts too. So half of this land in planned residential, if it's developed, 10% of that has to stay in open space. So similar to the golf course is open space, Longwood Crossing has open space. So that's not just going to be house after house after house and street after street after street. And again, all of these different land uses in the plan have a narrative, they have a typology. So we took aerial views of areas that we thought were representative of these different land uses, so people could see a top-down approach to where they are and what they look like from a top-down approach. Because if you say village center, what does that mean? So we try to provide a typology of an aerial view of each of those. This is the future land use map. So this is often the most scrutinized. A few things I wanted to point out with this, we did put some higher density allowances over on the west side of the township, and the purpose of that is to help stave off annexation from the city of Reynoldsburg. So the thought behind this, and we're using it over in Hanover, north of Hanover and Perry Township. The township is actually putting in, they're not even zoned yet, but they're thinking about putting in residential. Because if it is, if I'm a developer and I'm sitting over here looking at development and I can't get the density I need, guess who I'm calling? I'm calling the city of Reynoldsburg and said, hey, what density will you give me? And water and sewer availability and all that. So the thought is maybe we up the allowable densities along this corridor, Taylor Road, let's see, that's main, I forget. Summit, thank you. Allowing a little bit higher density than we would in the balance of the township in order to entice people to stay in the township without having them continually eat up and go into the city of Reynoldsburg. So that is a tactic in which townships can use to entice people to stay in the township. If you get this wall of housing built, Reynoldsburg cannot continue to come eastward into your township. So I wanted to highlight that. Also wanted to highlight we didn't really add any more manufacturing than is what is already here. By manufacturing, I mean warehousing, logistics, everything that currently is there. We had a long talk about this little guy over here. That's already zoned that way. We talked briefly about potentially keeping it ag, but it's already zoned like manufacturing. I don't know if there's a benefit to taking it back to ag, because I'm not sure property owner is going to come back and say, hey, will you change my highly profitable zoning district to a less profitable zoning district? So we left that there. This village center, again, is more trying to keep the densities close to this township, because you have 310, you have the corridors and the traffic. I know they're a pain, but we didn't want to put these uses, on York Road, where you have a much less capable street system to handle any development. So we kept that there. Light pink is just retail. So we looked at all of those. Mixed use is the magenta, I'll call it, up here, based on existing plans that have been approved by the township. Oh, let's see, I think that's about it. And then ag, on the south side of 70 as well. This is a transition, I think it's rural residential. So not ag, you'd have densities that are a little bit higher than you would in an ag district. So then with that comes a table of recommended land densities. Again, this is a policy, this is a recommendation from the committee and our team to implement your zoning, which we obviously highly recommend you jump right into after the comp plan is done. But here are the densities, but also have open space recommendations as well. So I mentioned planned residential, 3 units per acre and 40% open space. Excuse me, I think I said 50 earlier. So that is the recommended density. You should have a conversation amongst yourselves. Maybe that's right, maybe that's wrong, but that's what the committee voted on. That's what we recommended. Mixed use, ag, ag, we don't have any open space required. Mixed use, we have 30. So happy to dive into any of those calculations as well. A lot of these village centers and mixed uses are potential residential above with commercial on the bottom. So again, those areas are within the township core, and then up 310, not perforating into the rural agricultural areas. We want them right downtown in terms of traffic network. We don't want all of those units out of the periphery. Buffering, I already had a comment, which I appreciate. By the way, I don't get insulted anymore, so if you guys have any questions, you're not going to insult me. That ship sailed long ago. So if there is questions, let me know, or comments. Already heard these probably need to be expanded, widened, and not a problem. We had a great conversation about this, and so again, what the committee settled on is here. If you guys want to up that for whatever reason, great. Obviously, I don't recommend going south of those numbers. And then the last big thing, the last thing any consultant wants is this to sit on the shelf. So we put a couple pages in there of an implementation committee. I think as active as your steering committee was, I don't think you'd have a problem finding people to volunteer to do that. But basically get together on a regular basis as the trustees advise, and your zoning commission is already busy, you're already busy. So have this document in front of the implementation committee to advise the township of trends happening in the region, whether or not that's affecting your plan, and if it is, what are the possible recommendations that would come from that committee for you guys to consider, or your zoning commission to consider. So we started putting that in because we just didn't want to hand this to you and say, good luck. We want to make sure you guys are able to implement the things that are considered in the plan itself. So with everyone being busy, I know no one wants to create another board. You have park boards, you have fire boards, you have all that stuff, but as in the crosshairs as the township is, we thought it was important to have someone looking at this on your behalf to make sure it is ready to go as development occurs. So that is, So that is my elevator speech. The plan is very long. I also, so the plan itself has all the survey results We went in and edited them based on some unkind and unprofessional words. However, that is a public document, so we also will be giving the township the real raw data. But if you look at the some of the survey comments, maybe 5, some vulgarities we removed just to not let that be part of the document. However, it is a public document when we did the survey, so we're not destroying anything. We'll give it to the township for your archival, but wherever we remove something vulgar, we made that note, so you guys will have that as well. And I'm happy to answer any questions from the trustees or the public.
Trustees, do you have any questions or comments at this time?
I've got a couple. You showed the future land use map there. It is not in the draft provided to the board, and it's not within the printed thing. Both on page 29, which is our current zoning map, is the identical map on page 92, which is referenced as the future map for 2024, which is actually the current map. So this does not contain that future map. That's PRCD, and it's same as on the,
Do you have this at the beginning? This is,
page 29 is the same thing as page 92.
this is page 2 here. This might have been added, but do you have this one before the table of contents?
Well, that's the current map also.
Well,
Just repeat it.
Yeah, well, it's 3 times the current map. There's no, and that's what I brought up at the other meetings, that, so that's not included in there.
you're talking the zoning or the land use?
Land use.
Okay.
The link that I sent has the map, I believe, in it,
That's the one that I
independently.
printed. The link that you sent me is what I printed out for them.
And that's the one that has both the old maps,
Okay.
The old land use maps.
Yeah.
right?
the old zoning
maps.
maps.
Oh, zoning.
Zoning map.
Right. But the one here at the front here, I know the old zoning maps did not have the P and UD. This one shows the change as it comes to Scanell. That's an update.
That's zoning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and
He's saying that.
but the zoning maps where Scanell is, it's showing that's ag still, and there's some other,
Which one you looking at though?
page 29.
Oh, well then that probably doesn't
And page
coincide with this
92.
one, but this appears to be updated.
Yeah, the zoning map is updated. What Mark's saying is the future land use map isn't in there.
Okay.
Yeah, that one's,
There may be others, so if we can identify, what we think isn't correct.
and I think, okay, that one's corrected.
When I
That,
updated it, I must have.
that's corrected. Okay, yeah, because 29 is incorrect, so the ones that's in the front, because we had the Lance property that was rezoned, that was showing that. Tollgate, that one, across the street from,
Yep.
I know still across on Tollgate, the western side, that was, I thought, business accommodations all rezoned except one property, or I'm not sure.
Across from Scanell, correct?
Correct, on the west side.
Yep. Okay.
But then the other ones are updated, so as far as I'm concerned, that is, but like I said, so page 29, the map has the incorrect parcels, but definitely page 92 does not show the future land use.
So, yeah, Mark, so what I did, I pulled in the wrong map when I updated them.
Okay.
I have it, it's not in there. Go ahead.
Anything else? Well, we'll come
Well,
back.
yeah,
We'll come back.
I think I had questions because I haven't been able to review that, but Regarding, on the future land use map that I saw up there, you were saying to put higher density to the west to stave off annexation.
Yes.
Are you aware of our annexation agreement with Reynoldsburg?
Yes,
So with that agreement, we really don't need to stave off because the parcels are allowed are already identified, and I think they've only got the real large area, large parcels on the northeastern corner of Taylor and Maine. So all those other sections would not be subject to that, so I don't think we should be increasing density just for that. Maybe it should, but I don't think that should be a consideration.
okay, well, I understand. The only thing is just as the township is comfortable with, you know, all agreements can be broken. So that was the only thing in the back of my mind when you're, you know, as you're talking about that agreement. I understand, and yeah, I mean, if that thing is, if you're comfortable as the township with that agreement, then that probably
Well,
is not.
And that's true if different trustees come in or that they could
Or city
get
administration.
rid of the agreement.
Right.
Well, both sides would have to, but I know Reynoldsburg does want to get rid of that agreement. And so that might be something to also consider.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then on the PE, on the eastern side, you and I had talked about that, about since it's the PE, the gray square, yep. It's already zoned that. Well,
Yes.
a lot of these other parcels are already zoned something too. Isn't this kind of our wish list of this is how we would want to? So wouldn't we want to change that to whatever it is surrounding, and it's not forcing to change it, it's not that, but it might be an indicator for if they want economic incentives, well, maybe we shouldn't because it's not really recommended. Because the way this is looking, well, yeah, we should
Don't do
encourage
it.
it.
Yeah.
That would be my comment on that. The mixed use that was on there, that is the JBW now Pulte area, isn't that?
I think I understood it as
Isn't that
JBW.
north of, that's that PMUD that they passed?
Yeah,
Yes.
right north of the golf course.
North of the Trail East, correct?
Yes, north of.
Yeah, that's
On the west side.
that's strictly housing. They called it planned mixed use, but it's housing, and I think the commercial's on the east side, but I believe all of the development on the west side is single-family housing.
Okay.
That is correct.
So when you say east side of 310.
East side of 310, the JBW, they have a
Okay.
little small component that is north of the park, where the park touches 310, that's commercial component. And their open space that was for the western portion, we purchased for the park. But yeah, the western portion is housing.
Okay. Thank you.
And then buffering with the trees. One of the comments that we've had a lot is wintertime. The light pollution and all that's the same time, but a lot of the trees lose their leaves. So should there be a consideration for evergreens or those types? Because, you know, Skinnell is one that in the winter, once those leaves come down, it's the lights coming through.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we put both canopy and evergreen as a requirement. So in a small buffer, you would have 8 trees, 5 would be canopy,
So
3
you
would
would-
be,
Okay.
and then 5 on medium and 5 on large. So you could potentially up that if you want more coverage in the wintertime, or better coverage, I guess.
I think that would kind of be dependent on what it is or what, you know. Had a couple other things here.
And talking to your zoning consultant too, maybe even buffer or extend the widths of those. You know, right now we're at 30, 40, 50, maybe we can get up to 100 depending on the land uses, what is conflicting.
And then a comment on page 32, the maintained road network, just to have it correct, and I could forward this to you. Carpenter Way is not on there off of Tollgate. Connection, and I think it's, is it Heritage Drive? Between Schuster and Etna Parkway, and then the extension of, looks like Global Way to refugees, not on there. And again, I could forward this to you.
Okay, those are already planned?
Those are there. Carpenter Way has been there forever.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
You've got the maintained road network.
Gotcha.
So I'm just going through the things that I've noticed in
Yeah.
there. And I don't know if you want an update on page 40, the anticipated road improvements, Refugee Road, the roundabouts, and I mean, it's not anticipated, it'll be open in July, and, so I don't know
Yeah, when we talked about it, it was
how we want
anticipated.
to, 2 years ago it started, and then the Schuster Way extension, allowing the truck to bypass, I think that was a connection with the Etna Parkway coming over 170. I thought in the zoning commission, they recommended to remove that, or that shouldn't be encouraged. Is that, and I don't know if maybe this is an outdated draft, or were those taken into account with what was forwarded to the board? Or?
Yeah, so, should have been, because I updated the maps, hence the reason you got the duplicate map.
Okay, it's still showing the connector over 70, and
Yeah.
it's still showing number 7, that. So I just was,
Okay. Yeah, because after that, I met with Dave a couple times and got grammatical feedback too, so.
right, because
Okay.
Dave, didn't you guys recommend that it be not considered or not encouraged? Okay.
Okay. So,
Yeah, because page 45, it's showing that extension.
yeah.
If anybody else has anything while I'm looking through my notes,
I have a question on annexing.
I was speaking with the board.
Yeah, we'll get to that as soon as, go ahead, Mr. Evans.
Okay. The other thing, page 52, the current open space. There's a few that are missing. The western section of the park is not provided.
Which park is that, Mark?
The Etna, the new park, south northeast of 31040. You've got the east section, but the Langle middle connector, and then the connector that's on 310 that we purchased from JBW, that's not listed.
Okay.
And then also there, you've got the only place in the township that was developed in the planned residential conservation district, down in the southwest corner. You've got the small area of open space.
Mhm.
On the west of the development there, but on the east, there's a similar property. It's got a little walking path, and that's owned by the township, maintained by them, but that is open space too.
Okay.
And again, I can forward this to you. Flood zone, we're good, we're good. On page 79, the rural residential, at least 50% of the site should be preserved. I thought in the map it was showing a different percentage. I don't know what page the open space and the calculations were. Oh. rural residential, it's showing 0 open space, but I don't know how those line up of at least 50% of the overall site area should be preserved. And that's page 79 of your, and again, maybe change that with this draft, but I think on what was printed, Holly, you printed what was
Yeah.
from the file, right?
Yeah.
So it'll be the, yeah, because I didn't know what you meant by that as far as,
I'll have to read it to see what the context of it, when it says preserved. Because typically with rural residential, those are the large,
that's a 0.4 unit per acre.
yeah. So, yeah, 2 acre minimum.
Yeah, so that.
Yeah, I'll have to see what preserved, the context of preserved.
That's where I didn't know, single family. Page 91, the residential densities and open space. I know, I think we need to have a conversation of, it's good to have the open space and use, but I know one of the issues we're running into on, what is it, Half Farms, Mr. Burkholder, where there's the open space, and now they're saying they're having challenges or it's expensive to maintain. It was just handed over to the HOA from the developers, and they're looking at, well, now we gotta maintain this.
Yeah.
We don't wanna maintain it. So would it be better to, instead of requiring that much open space, to have maybe a centralized one area of open playfield, or kind of like a mini park or whatever, and just use sidewalks and stuff as the pass through it, less maintenance, because I'm not sure where the conversation's going with Half Farms, but I know there was a request of the township taking over it, and I don't think that's really good for the entire township to pay for the maintenance that was supposed to be within that development.
Yeah, so we worked with one township, your neighbor Harrison, they don't want any of those, they don't want open space for that very reason. You know, other townships do want it, but they want someone else to maintain it, so. The thing about the open space, I don't think it's dictated in the plan that it has to be where, it doesn't dictate where it goes. So as you're talking to the developer, if you're saying, hey, we don't want this, you know, open space that percolates everywhere, you know, maybe you just compact it. We can add a paragraph to that effect of, if open space is dedicated as part of a residential development, it needs to be not, you know, linear, it needs to be really in one place that is easy to maintain. I mean, we could easily draft something.
Because I know the developers would rather have the micro lots of, you know, right next to each other, all the utilities there, and then have some open space if you need it. But it seems like, I guess it's a preference of, do you give people larger yards where people could play within their own property,
Right.
more so than needing to go out because you don't even have enough room to
Right.
throw a football.
So that's the Harrison Township example. They are going with A of your example. They say everyone's gonna play in their own yard and have their bigger yards.
Okay.
But there's also operational maintenance from your standpoint. You then have to potentially plow more street frontage. You know, streets get potentially longer as well. So
Okay.
there's
And-
pluses and minuses.
Right, and then the other question is the density, because I know originally it was gross density at, I think, we'll use the
Yeah.
plain residential at 5 units per acre,
Mhm.
which we had the referendum, and a lot of people are familiar with the old Hagee property, which has now been sold, but that would have allowed near 700 homes,
Mhm.
and 750 homes, I think.
Right.
That's high density when right now it's, 170. I think that's a big swing. Went down to 3 units. Was there any, because I heard, I watched the one meeting where it was, what about 3, what about 4, what about, was there any type of comparison used of, okay, this is a neighborhood that fits the 3 net, this is kind of what we're getting, that was discussed or presented, or?
No,
It
we-
kind of seemed like it was like, well, three sounds better.
Yeah, it was that. You know, it was a calculation, so we did calculations that night of what is 3 versus what is 4. Was there an example of this is a 3-unit development? No. Or a 3-unit per acre development? No, we did not have that.
And the net density would be the site area,
Yep.
right? Minus all the right-of-way, the drainage, wetlands, all
Yes, sir.
that.
Yes, sir.
And then minus the open space.
Yes, sir.
Correct, okay. Because, again, take the old Hagee Farm property, is 155 acres. On the Pulte plan, there was 30 acres of retention, detention, all that kind of stuff. I think there's 1.7 acres of right-of-way. And what that leaves you after the 40%, I think, is about 60 acres
Okay.
of net developable area, which would be about 186 units. Is that what you're intending
That
on
would
that
be
property?
that would be the calculation, yes.
Okay. Because I know the referendum, it turned down to 336. If you mimicked our neighborhood, I think it was closer to 160.
Okay.
And I think moving it up a little bit, I don't know, I think some of the numbers, we should probably calculate a little bit more and kind of see exactly what it is, to be fair to developers, to be fair to the people, you know. So I think maybe we as the board can do that. And then, that's the map that's wrong in 92. Buffering, I do agree, I think, unless, well, we're gonna be changing our zoning in that if we're gonna be doing that with the use codes and everything, but again, I think some of the buffering, we can have development if we have proper buffering and to be harmonious with resident, especially around residential, if it's around another commercial or that, like that, but again, the Skinnell property with a sound wall that you can see the trucks go over, that is 30-foot buffer, that it, I think that could have probably been done in a better way. And things like the Ashley Furniture, which is now Uline, and I don't know why this was done on Mink. The trees are on the outside of the fence. On Refugee, or no, on Mink, the trees are on the inside of the fence. On Refugee, the trees are on the outside of the fence.
Right away constraints.
It makes no sense. Why do you put the trees on the inside of the fence?
I'm with you there.
It's just that kind of stuff. To me, it's no brainer, but I don't know if we should put it in here, like that's the way it should be, or just some of the comments I've heard from residents and, you know, why. And even if you go to, if you look at Uline now and then look at what Patasko's doing across the street, you can tell a total difference between buffering requirements. Patasko has many more trees, many more. It's just, I think, if we can solidify a way to do it better, I think that would be best. And that might be, and somewhere in here you had the development. There was page 134. I thought High Point had more apartments in there. And then I know in this list of, you know, Broyles, Smoke Creek and all that, was missing Drayton Hall, which I think is near 200 apartment units, is it?
240, 10 buildings with 24 apartments.
Okay, 200.
Rentals per building.
So 204. I thought it
240
was significant enough to
Yeah.
list in here.
Absolutely on 310 on the east side there in front of the park.
So I just noticed that. And that's all really I had in there. I really can't comment on the future use. Like I said, I haven't gotten that. And then have you gotten any comments by our intern, Trishna?
Not yet, but she said she was going to let me know.
Okay.
Talk to her before the meeting.
That's all I have.
Yeah, we did a additional review. I had our intern do the additional review and go back and see if there are any other map amendments that might have been missed, just kind of a double check. I agree with the buffering. Our zoning has been very weak on the buffering, no rhyme or reason. Deciduous trees, but the spacing so far apart.
Doesn't matter.
We have storage units that light up like a Christmas tree, and the trees are so far apart and they're deciduous, so that's an area I know that we also talked about actually during the land use meetings. I agree on the density. Another thing is what constitutes open space. I know developers, even today, we hear comments from developers. I get to use my detention pond. I get to use the gully, the weeded.
That I can't put a house on.
That I can't put a house on, the floodplain and everything else. So I think as a community having stricter standards, it has to be usable open space, and obviously putting that into the calculations, and so that developers know, don't even ask or try to slide that
Did the
by.
county attempt to thwart that at all?
It's been a number of years ago when they redid the subdivision regulations. I'm not quite sure, but I'll give an example where in Cameron Chase, the floodplain was part of the residents' backyards, and the county came out and put monuments in their backyard saying you can't build beyond this. In other words, you can't use the rest of your backyard because part of it's in the floodplain.
Okay.
And I'd just like to say, I know the county is enforcing that. There was just a variance request on usable open space
Okay.
that they denied because there was a 10% of the open space had to be usable, certain type, and there was supposed to be 2.1 acres. They wanted to go down to like 0.82, and it just, more walking paths, more, things like that. So, a swimming pool covers, gets credit, but just the pool area, not the building it's in, different things like that. So the county does have some requirements in that aspect, but yeah, I think whatever we can do, but definitely the open space, because that's one thing I did hear about. Pulte was saying that they were just going to brush hog twice a year, and that's your open space. So enjoy it for that day or two. They can.
As far as that PE out on the eastern part of the township, I agree. I know what it's zoned, but things are changing out here as far as what kind of development may or may not come in. So I agree with Trustee Evans that I would definitely like to see what was that, planned residential conservation district? Was that correct? Or it's agricultural right now, right? Correct,
Well,
around it?
Yeah, I think it's ag around it.
Right now it's ag with
Right.
a PRCD overlay.
Yes.
But when you talk about annexation, the real threat, I think, of annexation right now is Kirkersville,
Okay.
because they can. And they've annexed that little portion to allow those two warehouses next to our
North.
development up in the northeast. So that's an area that if somehow we can get a hold of that. But yeah, again, we're not forcing anything, but I think as far as incentives and, because right now they can move ahead and put warehouses there if they want, but they're not going to without incentives.
Right, and that is adjacent to residential as well. So
It is.
there's been community concern expressed regarding, again, the situation why you're putting them so close to residential and some of the sound and other things that come with that kind of development.
Yeah, that'll be an easy change.
And that was done like, 12 years ago that was rezoned?
I remember when I was at the planning commission, so at least, maybe 15?
15, yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And I'll probably have some comments on the future land use plan as well. I know some of the changes we made because I was on the committee, and some of that has to do on toll gate, which I think those were incorporated, but we'll look at when you get the version
I'll send it to you before I leave.
to the board and stuff, then I'll make sure it's in there. But other than that, I will make a comment because it was part of the committee's conversation. I liked about the implementation committee because I do have concerns, as you said, that sometimes these plans get composed and adopted, but then where's the implementation? I know it was my understanding from one of our committee members that the previous plan had some possible architectural review components or aspects of the township way back when 2010 or whatever, but that never got implemented. So I'm very supportive of having an implementation committee. And I know we talked, how often do you look at your plan and review it? I think given the nature of what's occurring in Etna Township, we need to really look at it at an annual basis. We have contracted with Lance Schultz as a professional planner and a zoning expert, and so he's here tonight. He'll be working with us 3 days a week as part of our, I guess, concerted, coordinated effort to get better planning and to follow up on these kinds of things and to make sure that development is done orderly in the way that the township would like it to see done. So I'm glad that this is finally all coming together.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Mr. Evans.
I did have one other question. I thought, that one meeting I did hear, there was a discussion regarding the referendum as far as the history, because you have the history here. What, was that going to be included in this to show the intent of kind of the community, or?
Yeah, I think it was I forget a lot of things, but I think it was to show historical context of.
Correct.
Yeah.
I just didn't see it in here.
Okay.
Is it? I mean, we can look at it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll-
We'll give you an opportunity for some closing comments. I'm going to open it up to the public for comments and questions, but is there anything you want to say now before we go over to that, and then we'll allow you to have some comments or questions at the end, answer questions?
I will, I told Mr. Burkholder before, the committee was awesome to work with, and we had a lot of critical discussions. At the beginning of it, I wanted to make sure everyone was just a little bit upset. That means they didn't get everything they wanted. I was happy that the committee voted unanimously at the end to push it along towards the trustee's desk. So appreciate the help Laura gave with admin stuff, and yeah, appreciate the work of the committee, giving 280 hours of their time to this project. At least 280. That was 280 sitting in this room. Who knows what they did outside? So I appreciate that.
Very good, thank you. At this time, if there's anyone from the public that wants to make comments or ask questions, please come to the podium. Much like we do in regular trustee meetings, please state your name and address, and we'll give you 3 minutes, and then we'll go back and forth. We want to make sure everyone has an opportunity, and as time permits, we may have people come up maybe for a second time once these questions are asked or comments are made. So.
I just had a question for Eric. Or Jim, I mean.
I'll go by Eric, that's fine.
You be Eric, I'll be John.
State your name and address, please, sir.
John Hanson, 51 Ridgewood Drive. So on annexation, you're talking about the.
Could you please speak, so we can hear and.
So on annexation,
Where Rosalind sits next to Mr. Burkholder.
Okay, let me get my stuff. Yes, go ahead, sorry.
Come sit with me, Jim.
I'll come over here.
Yes, sir.
So on the Reynoldsburg annexation you're talking about there, the current one pending is Summit Road for 70 or 80 acres, as I understand it. Isn't annexation really different if it's by a landowner versus a city?
So cities cannot actually annex.
Right.
So, technology. So ultimately, any annexation is initiated by the property owner. Now, the type of annexation that occurs is up to the developer, but typically it's type 2 annexation, which no one can really fight because it's 100% of the property owner saying, hey, I want to go into the city. So then the city has to respond by passing all their legislation to accept that annexation petition. So Reynoldsburg cannot just go and gobble things up without the property owner.
Yeah, that's the way I understand it. And then, so all that fight that Etna and Reynoldsburg had, water, sewer, all that on Summit, and then the 80 acres next to Lakeland there, that it's Harvey's. property was annexed into Reynoldsburg. So why the big lawsuit there if the landowner was wanting to come into, how did that happen?
I will defer to the township.
I think that's outside the scope of this.
I have no idea.
this meeting.
Well, you brought up annexation and blocking annexation by building houses, but if you want to build that many houses there, you have to service water and sewer, and it's practically impossible west of Summit right now. There really is no water and sewer.
And right now, ORC allows these types of annexation agreements, and it's, if you want a copy of the current agreement.
Yeah, sure, bring one July 2nd, I'll pick up some stuff. I'll have some stuff for you too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
She's prepared.
Always.
I just need one little piece off of each of these.
Shelley Marie Epont, 114 Royalty Drive. I just wanted to let everyone know that first I was a member on the committee, and one thing we did, we repeatedly at each session, just so you're aware, we referred to the survey results. We repeatedly went back to what did the people want, what did the people say. And another thing I remember when we were trying to visualize future land use, some of the factors we took into consideration, not only what Jim had already suggested, like existing land topography and that kind of thing, but we also considered our neighboring entities and what they had already in place. What we anticipated they would be putting there, like for instance, Reynoldsburg, we knew they were planning some more higher density things towards the western part of our county, and that's right across from the Department of Agriculture. They have this beautiful, huge project. So that was another reason for the higher density proposed for the western part of Licking County. Let's see what other we can. And the idea was to try to envision like a flow or a gel of zones, so we wouldn't have, such as already exists in some places, like stark barriers between one zone and the next zone. So it would more likely flow. That's what we were going for, and we do realize it's not perfect. We know that, but we really did put forth our best faith efforts. We had great discussion. We drew on not only the survey results, and we kept going back to them, but our own experiences and our own knowledge of the township. We had some of the people on our committee who have been in the township for decades. So, and I learned a lot from them. I'm sure, we all learned a lot from each other. So I just wanted to let you know we really did work our best efforts to do, the best we could for everybody in the township. So, oh, and another thing, as long as I have time, something to put on your radar out there, more about like agricultural zoning to help encourage or preserve agricultural industries, not only on the big level that we know, but the small level, like personal agriculture. Like some HOAs now are prohibiting the gardening of fruits and vegetables in your yard. And agritourism is like smaller scale agriculturism, which we have Van Buren Acres is a good example of that. Niche farming would be greenhouses and hydroponics. If we can just keep that in the back of our mind. And I was thinking even maybe for some of the park space, especially like in the village center area or nearby, maybe community gardens, just things just to keep on our radar out there about this, because the agriculture is still Ohio's main industry, but it is shrinking exponentially every year. And if anybody had trouble getting certain groceries during COVID, you remember how nice it was when you happened to, your neighbor had eggs, and I went to Pataskal Meats. I mean, we were so fortunate to have these areas and these growers. So nearby. So wanted to put that on everybody's radar. And I have way more on that, but now's not the time. And something else that really helped me envisioning the zoning as far as the village center and more of the mixed use, we talked a lot about the walkability and some examples we were thinking, like perhaps think of how like Gahanna has Creekside little area. I grew up in Grandview Heights, and if any of you are familiar with what they've done with Grandview Avenue, something like that, that's mixed use. It's Worthington, just things like that. So we tried to really visualize and imagine what we could be as long as we, it seemed to be in Etna's best interest. So thank you for your time and consideration. I appreciate all the work, and I appreciate all the work that you trustees will be doing on this also. Thanks.
Thank you, and I appreciate you bringing up the fact that we did go back to that survey quite frequently to use that as a guide on what the community expressed in that survey and what they would like to see out here. Is there anyone else that would like to speak at this time? And then we'll go around a second time if some people have some additional comments, because we have time. Yes, sir.
Ryan Davis, 8807 Watkins Road. That was a pretty quick 9 months, wasn't it? Is that what you were originally planning?
Yeah.
Yes, I concur with everything that's said. I think the committee worked really hard to come up with the best options we could and the best ideas based on community feedback and what everyone in the committee, speaking for the township, thought we could do with our township. After I get done, I would like you to expand a little bit more about the annexation, because I know I would like this gentleman back here that you guys have hired to concretely give you guys the information to know what Etna Township and Reynoldsburg is or is not going to happen, because I think that's the biggest, scariest thing for most people that are not following this is if and when Reynoldsburg or even Kirkersville or whatever, what can the township do to prevent becoming something they don't want to? So I think that's the biggest concern that I have, and I think many people that aren't following this closely would. So if you could expand a little bit, I know you said Reynoldsburg can't reach in, but then, if the owner reaches out, then what can the township even do? So there's some language there I'd like you to clarify, but I think it's really important the implementation, like you said, Mr. Burkholder, happens, because I think it's important that no matter who sits up on the board or who's in the head of the township, that there's community members actively involved following this law and working together, because there was so much, as Mr. Leonard and the committee can say, there was so much time put into this, and it would just be terrible for key parts not to happen like it is. And we mentioned New Albany, and if New Albany can put their foot down and turn areas to be as beautiful as it can, I'm not worried about what this board will do as far as what they're going to try to do as far as making things look nice, but what can we do to make sure that whoever's on the board and whatever the future holds, that everything going forward doesn't create problems in the future. So, Mr. Leonard, if you would expand on that.
Yeah, the whole annexation thing. So townships are the bottom rung of government when it comes to land use in municipalities. So the tactic we used, at least in the company, and I listened to a Harlem Township Zoom meeting last night while I was mowing, because that's the nerd I am. Our planner was speaking up there about their fears of Columbus coming up and gobbling them up. And I felt a little bit better because he kind of alluded to the same tactic as I did about increasing the density potential on your borders. So that a developer is going to have to think long and hard. Do I want to go through the annexation process? Is it worth it? Water and sewer is something else that, is a little bit different out here because it's its own animal. So having a carrot, you can't stop it. If an adjacent property owner wants to go to Kirkersville and they got 100% buy-in, you're sitting here just watching your township get eaten up. So a tactic we used in St. Albans Township in Alexandria was, I think 80% of their future land use map is still ag, but what is not is very dense, because we wanted to make sure that area would be the area that grows. So it didn't, again, as this spider and go all the way into the township. So I think if you look at your borders, Jerome Township is currently going through it with MKSK, I believe. They got Marysville, they got Plain City, they got Dublin, they got Columbus, because they're trying to maintain themselves as a township as well. So I think the thing, and townships don't often want to hear it, density, I think, is your way to maintain the township in its entirety. Not density throughout the whole entire township, just density where those annexation pressures are going to occur. Because if you are able to keep land in the township at a slightly higher density, I'm not saying put in 80 units per acre, but if you do something that makes the developer think hard about going into the municipality versus staying out, I think that's one of the things you can do. Because the statutes and the state law for township zoning are actually being attacked right now at the State House, and what laws and tools you have are very few and far between. So again, I'm not advocating for density across the entire township, but I think looking hard at those maybe not western, because Mr. Evans mentioned the agreement. If that's locked in, great. So look towards the other end of the township and see what you can do to help keep that area in the township. And the only thing I can give you advice as a planner is density. That's why property owners go into municipalities. It's for density. So
If I could just
Go
make
ahead.
a couple points on that.
Sure.
Regarding the annexation to the west, it's been, like I said, there was an attempt, not an attempt, but they were considering it and moving forward, annexing the parcels west of Ballman Community for 2 warehouses. Reynoldsburg was kind of encouraging that. They were not discouraging that. After speaking with our legal counsel and talking about it a little bit publicly, they backed off. There were attempts or discussions to try to annex the old Hagee property into Reynoldsburg again to develop the way they wanted to. Again, we had that agreement. The one thing that I would say is that annexation agreement and what we can and can't do would be more of our attorney than our zoning department. And we've got good attorneys in that regard. So it is enforceable, it is allowed under ORC. Again, the eastern portion, I think there's different methods we could use. One thing, the township just put a TIF on all agricultural property that moves to commercial. So it's more a disincentive if somebody's going to annex it, that there's a TIF on that property if they're going commercial. So there's a bunch of different ways we could look at this, but I had brought up and I'd encouraged our board to be consulting, and hopefully they are now with our economic attorney regarding the annexation concerns to the east.
Another thing I might add is at least having lines of communication with your neighboring communities. So not only what their land use plan is, but what those elected officials feel. For example, Kirkersville, what is the intent? What is the vision that the mayor and the councils have there as well? It may not always be compatible with what we want, but I've always said, look at it regionally. Each community may want to develop a little bit differently, but I like what was said here is making sure that some of those transitions to different jurisdictions are smooth. For example, roadways, Taylor Road's a prime example, that the infrastructure, good infrastructure in Etna benefits Reynoldsburg and vice versa. You never want your adjoining neighbors to be unsuccessful because that'll have a negative impact on your community. So I agree with what Mr. Evans, and thanks, Jim, for giving that explanation of some of the various tools. But let's not forget the old common sense of sitting down with your neighbors and saying, what's your vision for this area and how can we work together? That would be the example of why we have JEDZs here, because Etna Township 20-some years ago was willing to work with Newark and forge a partnership there. And then the most recent ones, the 5 JEDs we have, is a partnership between between Reynoldsburg and the township. But I go back, 20-some years ago, and Reynoldsburg decided they were going to develop with a lot of multifamily and higher density. And in fact, way back then, there was what was called a CETA, a Community Economic Development Area, which did not go forward, but it's always been, I think, Reynoldsburg intent and policy to try to get more revenues by commercial but mostly industrial or manufacturing, which I think is what led to this agreement that we have, but also the annexation agreement. That's fine, we'll partner with you, but don't try to annex, because the survey was very clear. The residents out here want to control their own destiny and not have the city of Reynoldsburg control how development takes place in the unincorporated areas. But my bottom line is at least have conversations and see how things can be worked out amicably.
And I'll add too, if I may, looking at the home rule township is an idea too. That bumps your powers and duties up a little bit. Doesn't give you everything a municipality can do, but home rule townships per ORC. I think Jefferson Township's a home rule township here, pretty close. So
And I think Violet, is that
Violet
correct?
Township, I think there's only 37 home rule
Yeah,
townships
sure.
in Ohio out of the 1,000 something, so it's few, but I think, you have to pay for your legal, you have to
Sure.
pay for your sheriff's car, a lot of the stuff we're doing, so I think it's something we should be looking at. And residents, I think you mentioned, I think Mr. Bundy has said that, but I do have one other question.
Go ahead.
And with the future, like I said, I haven't seen this, but on the current zoning map, it's R2 on, what road is that? Watkins, south of 40, all the way down to Palmer. And then on the intersection of Palmer and Tollgate, that's R1 right now, but those areas are showing just ag and maybe residential on the western side. If you look at the front page of the report, or right there,
Yeah.
Right now it's R1 in that area, and then going to Watkins to the right, all of that from 40 all the way down on each side is R2 right now. So was there do you think that's never going to go back to ag? It's R1 now.
Well, I think that bolsters your comment about this property.
That you should keep it if it's R1, it's okay.
But that property is where the Shelley Sands had all their equipment when they were redoing Main Street. Or whoever was doing Main Street. That property where it says PE, they were using that property for.
We're talking about the other areas.
No, we're talking about the railroad.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the red one, I'm talking about off of Watkins. Because if you look at the current map, it's all individual lots of R2 and then R1 is the other ones.
So you're saying the current land use or the zoning?
Correct zone.
Current zoning, yeah. So,
Well, I think, Mr. Evans, I think that plays into your comment about this property is.
Correct.
Is if we're gonna,
Well, that's what I'm saying, there's
Yeah.
a disparity.
Correct.
We have to pick, are we going with
I'm with
what
you.
we want to encourage versus.
I'm with you.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
And I think we've heard feedback from those on Tollgate that, it should be the larger lots and, so I think that kind of more reflects. And I don't know when, I tried to ascertain when that was rezoned R1 and I couldn't find it. That's all I had.
very good. Anyone else at this time? Yeah, come on up. State your name and address, please, and
Okay. Manoj Pokala, address is 13541 Palmer Road, Etna, Ohio. We own a piece of land on Palmer Road itself, and recently, for the last 2-3 weeks, we are working with Arbor Homes, and the way they want to build the homes is that they want to build the homes on our site and also the neighboring sites. and sell the homes at 325 to 350, 375K range. So the conversation, when we have been talking with them, in order to sell the homes at 350K, they need higher density, particularly on this piece of land where it has sewer and all utilities, including sewer. There is not much of land in, basically anywhere in central Ohio with all utilities on the available, particularly sewer. So we have been telling them to wait until the new comprehensive plan is passed. So our question is, do we have any timelines when this will be taken effect?
Well, I think first of all, we'll make these corrections in the comments we get here tonight and get those incorporated, and then it'll come to the board. Do you have any thoughts? Probably it'd be at least a couple meetings from.
I'd say a couple meetings. I would encourage us to get out, like, what has been put out, that I put out, doesn't have that future land map. So I think we need to get more public input. I'm appreciative of those who are attending here, but, comparatively in the township, it's not many people. So if we can get maybe some written feedback or, something like that with the corrected version, I think that would be good. But I do think, this has been going on 2 years, that we need to bring it to a close. And it doesn't change any zoning. It doesn't change, that'll be the next step of, and I think we're going to have to decide as a board, are we going to wait until that zoning's changed? Or if a developer wants to develop, are we going to create exceptions before we make those changes? Because the past boards, we had the comprehensive plan was in 2011, and the only time I think it was ever followed was at one PRCD in the southwestern portion. Otherwise, if you look at almost every staff report by Lincoln County Planning Commission, it says this does not follow the comprehensive plan. If you do what you're going to do, you should change the comprehensive plan. So I think we need to abide by that, but are we going to change that zoning? And that might be another, the implementation. How do we want to handle that as a board?
You mean as far as updating the zoning, when you say
Updated, well, say like right now, their property, it's the old Hague farm.
Right.
And right now, it's PRCD overlay, which allows one unit per acre net developable area, or you can have a bonus of 1.2 total if you have walking paths and some other criteria in that.
Right.
To move forward in anything different, you would have to rezone it different. How would you do that? What the past boards have done is said it's planned mixed use development, it's a single use, but we're going to call it mixed use, and we're going to just do whatever we want. What mechanism are we going to follow, or can we follow, to do that, to implement it? And what kind of timeline to change the zoning code? You know what I'm saying? Because we don't, right now, we don't have planned residential. We don't have rural residential. We have R1, R2.
Right.
We've got,
I think to that R1, R2, the intent, I think, you could take your zoning code and check it against the comp plan. So I don't think you have to necessarily create all new districts, but anything that you can find comparable, maybe you call it something else in your zoning code, but it's called something different in the comp plan. I don't think we're suggesting you create all new zoning districts, but look at the existing districts and modify them.
because I don't think, the only one that I think has open space is a PRCD, which required 50% open space, 30 acre lots, different things like that, but R1, R2, I don't think there's any open space requirements. So how do you configure, because if you rezone it R1 and you're going to do something different, would that be a variance on that? And that would be the board that would, like, that mechanism. how are we gonna do that?
How do you reconcile, when we update the zoning code, how do we reconcile those densities and restrictions
Right.
with what we currently have
Yeah.
as far as ground that's gonna be developed? How do we, and the land use?
Yeah, I think that you gotta figure it out for whatever's best for the township. I don't, as a reformed city administrator, you're never gonna be ready to accept development as you're updating a zoning resolution. There's always gonna be, or should be, updates to your zoning resolution. There's always gonna be new developments. So I don't think there's a perfect time to, I don't say accept, but cut things off or accept or moratoriums, because you as a urban township, for lack of a better term, are always gonna be under that pressure. So I think if and when this new comp plan is adopted, you're gonna be in the throes of updating your zoning ordinances. You're gonna get redevelopment or rezoning requests. I think you gotta use this as your guide, and that can help inform the zoning change, and you got a
But
professional.
in what class, because again, there were on the northeast corner of 310 Palmer, they, when I came in office, they wanted to rezone it PMUD, planned mixed use development. It was M1, it was 2 warehouses. And I'm against using things just because you could do anything you want in it. It's gotta be mixed, if it's true mixed use, yeah, you can do it. But on that property, I know they have proposed commercial in the front at one point, and then residential back. I don't think it's a good area for commercial, but that would have been a mixed use. I'm just wondering, I think we need to, as we're working through the final stages of this, parallel to that, work on how we're going to do it to allow, because we don't want to stifle development. Start, Mr. Hanson, please, decorum. We don't want to finish this and then say, okay, now I want to think about this.
Yeah.
I think we should be thinking about that now, of how we're going to implement it, even in a transitionary way, or as long as it's legal, proper. I don't want to just use the PMUD just to, hey.
Well, let me use that as an example, and the problem with the problem, when you have a PMUD, it's all in the final development plan. So I agree with Mr. Evans to call it a PMUD and then come in and have a single use and make it a warehouse. That is not the proper way. I'll lose Cumberland Trail, that's a planned unit development. I'm very familiar with it. I've looked at the preliminary plan. I think you were at Lincoln County Planning at the time. It was very detailed, the kinds of houses, the facades you had to have, smaller lots, the green space was the golf course. There were some things that didn't turn out the way they should have, but the township trustees at that time really knew down to a very fine detail. So I agree with Mr. Evans is, first of all, the devil's in the detail, and if you give some extra densities, whether it's a planned unit development or a mixed unit development, you really need to ensure that the developer brings that detail, that level of detail of what the township's going to get, what the community's going to get. And if they don't, then they don't get the zoning. And but I agree. I think the PMUD has been misused to say it's planned mixed use, and then it's a single use or a warehouse.
And maybe the PUD might be a vehicle. I haven't researched the PUD as much as the PMUD or the PRCD. So
From a residential standpoint, I'd like to see us, I don't know, Jim, if you want to chime in, you've dealt with both, but the PUD, you got a lot more control on what you're going to get and what it's going to look like and what the setbacks are going to be. And with some of the other zoning, it's kind of wide open.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I guess going back on my end, I would commit to the township. I mean, I can have these updates to you within 7 days.
Okay.
There's, what I've seen here isn't astronomical.
No.
I think the critical thing is giving you the future land use map, which is done, it's just not in the document. But what the deletions and some of the comments that are made, that's a day's worth of work. It's just my schedule the next couple of days.
That's fine, we'll put it back on the agenda and we'll post it on the website, Mr. Evans, the corrected version. So if people want to access that and still have some questions or feedback, I think that would be great. I think to hitchhike on what you're saying regarding the zoning, I hope that we have a proposal to redo the zoning from McBride Dale, and I would hope that that we move forward with that. I don't think we have to necessarily, this is probably going to get adopted within at the most a month to 6 weeks, maybe sooner, but that we begin to initiate and go ahead and contract with McBride Dale to begin to gear up for what we're going to request regarding updating our zoning code, so that that process is moving forward somewhat simultaneously. I mean, they have a draft of this, they'll have the updated draft as soon as Mr. Leonard makes some corrections, and so, but I'd like to see us in the very near future begin to implement that second phase. And of course, now we have our in-house planning consultant who will be helpful in that as well.
And as far as the planned unit development, I'm sorry, do you want to make other comments?
I don't think
so. We're not.
That's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure that we don't go on a tangent here.
Right.
We want to make more comments. But as far as the planned unit development, is that a standalone, like a PMUD, where it's its own, right?
It's its own unique,
zoning?
it's its own unique zoning.
Are those listed separately on our website or available? Because I know Cameron Chase
Yes,
is PUD.
That's correct.
And I don't think I've ever seen a PUD listed.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the things we're working on right now. Back when I was on the board, I think it was when I was on the board or shortly thereafter, they took the PUD zoning section out of the township zoning resolution. But given that we already had some PUDs, that unique, and it's a thick booklet, all that unique features of that particular planned unit development were to be in the appendix of our zoning resolution. Now, we have some recent developments, and I think they're mostly the commercial ones that have that in our current resolution, but I did not see Cumberland Trail or Cameron Chase, and that's what we're trying to identify, because those should be in our resolution as an appendix, so that anyone, and particularly for our code enforcement, because anyone that comes in and wants to do something in those unique districts, we need to know what the requirements are from a zoning standpoint that apply to that. So it's not like straight zoning, it's unique zoning with a lot more detail. And that's something that we need to correct as well, Mr. Evans, and working with our consultants to find those and make those available as well. But we had an issue today that came up on Cumberland Trail, what's the zoning, and we got to go to the book. We've got to find that appendix that details what you can and can't do in that zone.
Right. Well, I know looking here, we've got the planned residential districts,
Right.
which are planned unit districts. So yeah, I think between legal and our new consultant, maybe we should start looking at how we would implement that.
Yes.
If we want to make the changes, or if we're going to stick with the existing until we're through.
Yeah, that should all be part of the conversation. And actually, Cumberland Trail really is a mixed use, because I don't know if they included it in the book. I don't know if you recall, Jim, but you've got the commercial strip center, you've got the apartments, I think the condos. That was all part of the same development, but I don't know on the commercial if that was an afterthought.
If the bank was too on this side of 310, I don't know.
Yeah, I think the bank was a separate parcel. That was a residential, and then they sold it to the bank.
And one other thing, there was a comment by a resident about how we ensure that it's done right in the future. Basically following the comp plan. There are no insurances. It's based on the trustees that are elected, and that will follow the plans, because the board institutes this and the board can change it. As we saw over the years, they didn't follow the comprehensive plan in that, so there's really no way to ensure that the comprehensive plans followed. I know, one thing I would say is that our current, and we would be changing it, our current zoning actually references our comprehensive plan, that it must meet it. So that's where I think it diverges from being a guide. And when we're going through that referendum process, legal advice was that would be an avenue of lawsuit to enforce that it didn't. So that's something to keep in mind for the next thing of, do we want to reference it and require it, or, and it kind of limits you, opens it up to lawsuits, or do you want to just keep it as a guide?
That's a good question.
So those are the kind of things that I think we need to address.
And I'll give an example. When you do change your comprehensive land use plan, as Mr. Leonard stated correctly, there is a process you have to follow. It's not just the three trustees saying, hey, we're gonna change this. And in fact, Cumberland Trail is another example. Phase 7 of Cumberland Trail is different, and it was changed, the comp plan, because the original lots were larger, and then when the owner of the golf course said, I want to develop that final phase, they came back to the township, went through the process, and changed that so that they could have smaller lots and a different layout over there. And that did go through. I wasn't on the board, but it did go through a process, and that's how that final phase. So but there is a process. So back to your point, Mr. Evans.
But there's no process required for the comp plan, but you're talking about the development plan. If that
The
changes.
PUD, yeah, the PUD, which was the planned unit development.
Yeah.
But you can also change your comp plan too,
Sure.
correct? Yeah, but there is a process for that as well.
No, there's no process for a comp plan.
Well, it takes
We
the
can just-
trustees.
Right, but
Yeah,
we
that's
don't
what
have
I
to
mean.
put it to zoning.
Right.
We don't
Right.
have to put it to,
Right.
we could just, one meeting, decide we want to change it.
Well, and I think that's the point, though, is to have the transparency,
Right.
and that if you're gonna change the comp plan, at least have, public hearings. and-
Yeah, we always recommend just follow your zoning procedure if you're gonna change your comp plan. Do you have to Mr. Evans' point? No, you can change it tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah, we shouldn't, but
You should.
there's no prescribed process.
And yeah,
Anyone else? We've got some time. Yes, sir. Just so we know who's speaking, just if you don't mind stating your name and address again, so when we do the minutes.
Sure.
Thank you.
John Hanson, 51 Ridgewood. So, Mr. Lerner, you were talking about the density on the edges and stuff. And, I know there's no perfect solutions. There's always only trade-offs. So last year, every meeting, somebody come up here and said, we need restaurants, we need medical, we need office, we need services, we need all this stuff. And any restaurant developer you talk to, grocery store, anybody, even gas stations, they look at rooftops. So the density is kind of a trade-off. And on the annexation, all the Summit Road battle and the 192 acres that went to Reynoldsburg there, it had very little to do with wanting to be in Reynoldsburg. It is the water cost is $12,000 more per unit, per tap, 12,000 more. It was 15,500 when I built in Etna. 15,500, and that was 20 years ago. I don't know how much it is now. And at that time, Reynoldsburg was 25. The last time I looked at Reynoldsburg, it was $3,000 or $4,000. So it's a lot of it's economic concerns driving this. It's not that somebody doesn't like Etna or doesn't want to be in Etna. Sometimes the geographic configuration is just going to force you to do something else. Taylor Road, where all those condos went in, and that little trailer court got blown out. A buddy of mine arranged the land deal for all that. It's where it's built all the way around that little brick church. Well, that was definitely over water. So that was, annexed into Reynoldsburg because of that. So those are some of the considerations. It's not, you can want to halt development and want to halt density, but there are some trade-offs. Can you expand on that, Mr. Lerner?
I dealt with a lot of that in Johnstown. Everyone wanted to Bob Evans. I don't know if there was investors in Bob Evans that lived there or what, but but they didn't want traffic and they didn't want increased school population. They didn't want all these things. So Yeah, you're absolutely right. Gas stations want cars. They want cars driven by. Restaurants want cars driven by. So, yeah, it's interesting. Most of the communities we work in, it's the same conversation. We want all these amenities. We just don't want anyone living here. So you won't get the I use Bob Evans, but sorry, Bob Evans, but you won't get anything, if you don't have those houses. The trade-off too is if everyone is driving in their car to go to Bob Evans in Reynoldsburg or Granville or whatever, now you have increased traffic. So what if you did have a Bob Evans in Etna Township? Car trips would be less frequent, maybe less people on the roadway. So to your point of trade-offs, absolutely. There's economic trade-offs for the township. Townships live on property tax, not income tax. So development is good that way, potentially.
Right.
So I agree, there's trade-offs. It's the identity of the township, which direction you want to go, and are you willing to live with those trade-offs?
But a lot of times with this board, anything is dismissed automatically, a priori, because of density without looking at what the project will be. And, you talk about density and you think of India with people living on top of each other. Actually, the highest density in the U.S. is Palo Alto, California. It's one of the most desirable places in the world. I mean, part of it's Stanford and all the things that are there. But that's the highest density in the United States, and anybody here would trade one of their houses for a place there.
Yeah, that's why I said with the future land use map in the chart, let's not get solely fixed. I mean, it's an important piece. I'm not trying to underplay it. But how does it compare, or how do you incorporate sidewalks and parks and potential mixed use? So creating those high value, everyone wants high value homes, except for the people that can't afford them.
Right.
Because if you have those amenities and you have a total package and not just solely looking at density, I think ultimately is a benefit for everybody. So getting fixated on just density is not a recommendation I ever do.
I think Dublin's having the same spat over 8 or 10 acres that's Duke office. They want to put in a mixed use thing, kind of piazza type.
Yeah, everybody. I mean, Worthington and their redevelopment of the Children's Hospital or whatever. You can't get out of Central Iowa without having that discussion. Okay. I just like to push people to think about everything else that could go along with the development, including density. That's very important.
But if the residents truly want all these services, it's going to take rooftops.
Absolutely.
So then if it's going to take rooftops, we ought to look at some higher density stuff that is well done. I agree if it's just like Miranda Homes boxes shoved, 8 feet apart, that's not the answer.
Correct.
But there are some multi-level developments where you have commercial below, it's nice apartments or condos, and you could look at Easton for one. There are some possibilities that would bring people in, and you shouldn't be afraid of density. You should just worry about attracting, a good clientele.
Well, and I think this board is, I know for a fact this board is open to that, but the main thing here was quality. I'll give you an example. The strip center, if you look at the strip center at 40 and Columbia Road, I complained about that 20 years ago to the county commissioners. There's no sidewalk. There's no connectivity. That asphalt pad goes to nowhere except to where the driveway, which is vehicular traffic. There are a lot of things that should have been done better, and yet you've got quite a bit of density. But the density isn't just in Etna Township. Here's where I think we need to be talking to our neighboring communities. There's going to be over 130 homes plus commercial development at Refugee and on the east side of 310. That's Pataskala. Right. We have developers all the time saying, hey, we want to do this, we want to do that. But I think the 310 corridor, we all have to be very careful and work together to make sure that corridor stays viable. The multi-use path that comes from 70, both south of 70 up here, it doesn't even connect to Pike Street here. Those are the things that we're working on now to get the quality and the connectivity to make it, to your point, the quality. So the density isn't just you don't have to have density just in Etna to have those amenities. It is about rooftops, but you're gonna have quite a bit of density when you look north on 310 of what Pataskla is bringing in. And one of the challenges of any public figure is then to work with our schools and get the proper balance so that we don't overcrowd our schools, so that we have the public infrastructure as well. I can tell you, this 310 corridor going to 70 is going to get jammed up very soon, particularly when you look at the type of industrial development that's taking place in Pataskla now. So all those factors, it's a little bit of art and science to make sure you try to get the proper balance. And unfortunately, only the test of time will prove whether we did a good job or if we kind of missed the mark.
Well, what's holding up the big project there behind the Speedway?
Sewer.
Sewer?
Sewer, and they're not approved through Licking County. There's a lot of back and forth going on with the Licking County Planning Department, but sewer capacity and availability.
Phase one, they have enough sewer for phase one. The developer doesn't want to move forward unless they have enough for the entire development, because
Yeah,
he's
makes
got to put the infrastructure for everything in. So he can move forward right now with phase one, but he just chooses not to.
Well, there are also things out with the county too that have to be met. It's my understanding he hasn't met yet either.
Okay.
And so while we're talking about infrastructure, there's also a gap here on Pike Street.
Right.
Pike Street was not planned all the way to go out to 40 in the first phase of funding from Morpsey. For whatever reason, 550 feet were not included in the application. So
Yeah, I
that's
remember
something.
that in an earlier meeting this year.
That's something the township is working on currently to see if we can submit another application.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then I'd just like
Thank
to
you.
say on density, I think one of the concerns is of the schools, not flooding them with students. It would be less of a concern if a lot of the funding that would have went to them from the commercial would not have been diverted. Just two small projects here on 310 were given TIFs, and over 10 years on those two small properties, approximately 3.6 million is going to be diverted away from school, about 1.2 away from the fire district. And that's the smaller developments there. So if the schools would have had that funding, I think it would be easier to accept a little bit higher density. But if they're gonna accept that higher density without that funding, it puts it on the backs of all the residents through higher taxes, levies, bonds, and stuff like that.
Well, not everybody's gonna have kids, and if you're building a multi-level and it has these small condos and stuff, it's gonna be for retirees, it's gonna be elevator buildings.
A lot of times people say it's retirees, now that you can't restrict who's gonna be in there, but the other thing about the amenities.
Well,
in
you
that-
can if it's a 55 and over, then the government has that type of legislation. Ask Mr. Lerner that.
But not over again.
Our attorney was questioning that. But as far as amenities in that, prior comprehensive plan had local commercial business on 310 in front of where Kohl's is, in front of where Sheetz is, and the past boards allowed them not to do that. It would have been a perfect location that you have that density. You have High Point going in there with really high density. It's off the highway. Have that local business in front, Bob Evans, whatever, Cracker Barrel, and the warehouse behind it, but they just let them not do that. So that's one of the issues of that would have been the prime location for those businesses, and it wasn't done. So we've got to keep that in mind, but I think we've got the density. I mean, with all those houses coming in, it's like, how dense do you want to be? And I still say that we can be an oasis of a rural field community. It's not going to stay farmland. But even with that, there are programs where we can encourage that and preserve that, but we don't have to be Reynoldsburg. We don't have to be Columbus. We have people building homes on 2 acres, 5 acre lots right now. People want that, so we can be that destination for that.
Yeah, it's over 700 units, I believe, down there on High Point alone. Plus, you're looking at 240 on 310. You're looking at what Pataskla is doing. There are other housing developments, American Homes for Rent off of Refugee and Smoke.
Those are all rentals, but yeah. I get it.
Well, they are, but that's population.
Right.
And then let me just add that there are commercial lots gonna be going on the Pataskala site. We've got commercial lots, and some of those will be off of Refugee. There'll be, commercial out parcels at High Point. So we don't know what those will be, but I think some of the amenities that people may want and some of that commercial development may fit that need of what people would like to see come here.
Well, if I may, what I disagree with this board and what I don't like about this board is that it's summarily, anything is summarily dismissed up front. It's thrown to the attorneys. You don't even talk to business people and developers about what they're doing. You go to court or.
Well, that's
You're
not
just-
correct, sir.
That is
It's just
not correct.
That's correct in my case. You're suing me now.
Well, I won't speak on any
I wouldn't either.
pending
But
litigation.
what did Mr. Evans say when the developer come up? I'm not meeting with him, and I'm not talking to any developers.
We're gonna do,
No, that was on the one property
The 310.
that they wanted to talk about, not of rezoning and doing it different. And until we have this comprehensive plan and know what we're doing, and we have other developers that have been waiting over a year, 2 years.
yeah.
So it's not fair to, and I've talked to them and I've told them that, once we're through with this and because if the comprehensive plan says it should be this and they're doing something totally different, why are we having a discussion? But I have discussions with business owners and developers and residents all the time. My number's out there. People
But
call
that's-
me all the time. So to say that is disingenuous.
Well, let's get back
It's not
on
what I'm
track.
hearing from developers.
You've exceeded your time there, sir. Is there anyone else at this time that would like to
Thank you.
speak? Thank you. Yes? Yeah. We'll make time for everybody, so come on up.
Sure, Judd.
All this zoning and density and stuff is riveting, but I want to, Chuck Bundy, 10254 Tollgate Road Southwest. And I got a question about the surface transportation. I noticed on the map, and on the last map I saw, it looks like you're upgrading Palmer Road south of 40 down, I'm sorry, you're upgrading Mink Street south of 40 down to Palmer, and then east on Palmer to who knows where. Why would that upgrade be upgraded?
That's Etna Parkway extension over 70 to Palmer, going out to
Okay,
Tollgate and
That's not Main Street.
Schuster Way.
Correct.
Well, it's not going down Palmer. Other ones went down Palmer, but
Yeah, this is mink, and then, correct me, Mr. Evans, this is the blue that needs to be removed based on zoning commission's
is
recommendation.
that Palmer Road is going east?
Palmer's right here.
it's right before Palmer. It goes through the Harvey property, but it's actually going through a resident right there.
Yeah.
That's my house.
Yeah.
Well, these two blue lines go away, so.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that's good.
But that was, I became aware of that plan back when they were talking about Skinnell, and it happened to be on a map. And so that was the first time I heard about that plan of extending over and bringing all the truck traffic that way. And that was part of the original plan. When I came into office, I sat down with the developer and they said, here's the plan. Warehouses south of 70 from Mink to 310. Warehouses. They wanted to make it all commercial. And I was absolutely against that, but that was part of that plan
Okay.
of making it a commercial corridor.
So that is not a viable route, that Palmer upgrade?
Well, it's not Palmer, but no, this will be coming off.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear.
And that's something that's been discussed
We made some of
generally in the area, but
Yeah,
there's
that
no
goes,
plans
that goes
right
back
now.
a number of years to try to figure, and so, but yeah. give
Well,
it-
when Mr. Carlisle was sitting in your
Right,
place,
right.
he was saying, he told me that Palmer Road's gonna be 4-lane with a divider down the middle, and it didn't seem right to me, so that's gonna go away. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
David?
That's a
Trustees?
shameless plug for our
Yes,
transportation project.
yes, please do.
So, and another client, ODOT is currently under an ODOT study from 161 to 70. So, they're currently taking public input. The few stakeholder meetings will be taking place in the next couple weeks. So if anybody wants to take a look at that project, publicinput.com/16. Why is that? Yeah, 16-170 study. Oh, it's late. It's 16170 study. So publicinput.com 16170 study. So 16170 study.com. And Etna is one of the communities within that study area, so take a look at that and give us any feedback, or give ODOT any feedback, I should say.
Jim, I got a quick question for you. I know that I heard that framework will be kind of complete by September, and I think there were some comments where do we, and I don't know if you've interacted with that, where does the region go from there? I know Morpsey is looking at a 14, 15 county water and sewer study and working with the various entities, but what have you heard as far as the transition from?
No, I haven't. I know the T. J. Evans Foundation is backing away. Their job is done, but I don't know where it's going to go. I haven't heard. I don't know if they're waiting on a new planning director to make that decision or what.
Okay, well, thank you.
One other thing, I just request for, Jim, I'll send you my corrections
Please.
and suggestions, but I know our intern, Ms. Tatal, she went through and it looked like more like errors in that, but I would request, if you have any ideas about just the concept, what's proposed, not just spelling or, the scales and that, I'd love to hear it, just because, your education, your background, your experience, and same with our new consultant, because I think this is very important for the community. This is our future, and I think if we step off on the right foot with it, I think it'll be great. We've got some things that we do have to address that were done in the past, but I think we can get there and really make this a community that everybody wants to be a part of for generations to come. And that's in conjunction with the residents now, developers, landowners, business owners, and that. So again, I would encourage anybody to send feedback to us. You can do it at office@etnatownship.com. And like I said, just looking forward to hearing everybody's input.
I want to thank everyone for coming. Thank you, Mr. Leonard. And
Thank you.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Burkholder?
Yes. Stand adjourned at 8 o'clock. Thank you.
Look at that.
That was a nice job.
Yeah, maybe we put it in the right
It's
now.
whatever your ideas, if you see something or like, hey,
Frustration.
I saw this over here.
That's the website I was talking about.
Slash 161.
Yeah, I'll send it. All this, just